Welcome back to 40 Plus Fit, your go-to source for navigating health and fitness as we embrace our vibrant 40s and beyond. Today, we're diving into a fascinating and often misunderstood topic: the differences men and women can experience on their weight loss journeys. Have you ever wondered why sometimes it seems like men drop weight more easily, or why women face unique hormonal hurdles? Well, we're here to shed light on these distinctions, empower you with some knowledge, and hopefully help you to tailor your approach for the best possible results, no matter your gender. We're going to be
Today,
chatting about this. You've all experienced this. I'm sure you've experienced this in your coaching of clients. I've experienced this in my own life. Is that I get my wife who complains each time when we go on a weight loss a journey together, and she's like, we've all seen the memes on Instagram, but this is the real life examples.
Mm.
Is that, she's like cutting calories, she's only eating protein and fiber, like completely dropped the carbs for the week. No enjoyment of food at all because there's no snacks, there's no nothing, there's this. She's done 6 hours of cardio, 20 hours of resistance training, and she picked up 2 kilos. And then me, I looked at, I read an article about dieting and I lost 2 kilos. And then she'll blow up with this, 'cause what's going
yeah,
on? But
yeah,
there is a bit of a difference, right?
for
So
sure, man, for sure.
when we look at these kind of things, is perhaps we can break it up into a couple of the different stages and we can talk about them maybe section by section by section, just to keep a bit of structure to the conversation. But
Yeah, yeah.
when we're looking at the initial getting onto a weight loss journey, is there a difference between men and women when you're starting out on the weight loss journey? That there's like maybe some physiological reasons why men will lose weight faster than women in the beginning?
I don't think it's more so much a beginning thing, because all these reasons will be the same reasons that affect the entire journey, to be honest. So from that point, I think the biggest physiological reason is that majority of women are just smaller in size. And the reality is that a smaller bunch of mass requires less calories to maintain. Um, and leading on from that point, women also naturally have lesser muscle mass, just biologically. So the body composition of a woman is higher in fat than it is to a man.
Hmm.
Yeah. So for guys, let's say like bodybuilding stage lean, maybe 5%, 6% body fat. For women, bodybuilding stage lean is still upwards of like 11%, 12%.
Which is
Right.
like lean for me.
Which is lean for anybody, to be
Yeah.
honest. Yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is like even at the
Yeah.
leanest levels, you're talking like shredded and super lean and vascular, a woman's body fat is still 10%. That's still like 10% plus, right?
Hmm.
1/10 of the body is still fat. And so just by that these two things alone, women already have that disadvantage. So when you're going into it already, it's like let's say if you compare two people trying to run the same race, but one person, you know, is maybe given heavier shoes to wear, for example.
Yeah.
There's already this like a restrictive handicap that it cannot be removed. And of course, people like to. I think the more unscrupulous marketers might try to use that to trigger more emotional stuff, right? And try to market towards that. But I think the best way to go about it really is just accept that fact that there is this difference and then learn how to work within that. Because you can cry all you want about it, but ultimately still you take the same actions.
So when you're looking at that, right, because you're talking about the lean mass. So when you're talking
Yes.
about lean mass that way, we're not talking about weight specifically, but we're talking about probably what is the difference between your muscle mass and your fat mass within the body. And that is also
Uh,
there's difference between that as well between men and women, right? In a general
yes.
sense.
Wait, so just to avoid, just to clarify, make sure there's no doubt here. So the first thing is a bigger amount of mass and a smaller amount of mass both have different burning capabilities. So it means
Mm.
like if you're smaller, you can be super muscular, but if you're smaller, you're still going to be burning lesser. So even a guy that's like lean I've had guys that when I take them down into competition and they have to be, because they're quite short, and for them competition stage lean is like 65 kilos, 60 kilos, something low, right? Around that range, they're still proportionally the amount of calories that they actually need is actually really low. Some of the guys, they're like 1,500 calories, which is, by any normal standard, that's pretty low calories.
It's like one
Uh,
meal for some people.
yeah, right. So just by virtue of the fact that you're smaller in size, you're already
Yeah.
going to be burning less. Okay, so that's the first thing. Then the differences come in. It's not the gender differences per se, but it's just the differences in the type of muscle mass and fat mass distribution. So that's the body composition distribution. So whether you're male or female, let's say you get a male and a female that are both the exact same body fat composition at the exact same weight, they're probably going to be around the same range of burning. Now, the biggest genetic difference that comes from the amount of calories that you burn, that's actually more related to organ metabolism. So how much energy does your brain use? How much energy does your kidneys, your lungs, your
Mm.
liver, all these, how much do they use? And then the rest of these other aspects. Muscle, believe it or not, muscle actually doesn't burn that much in the entire scheme of the body. Muscle only burns like I think about 1 kilo is anywhere between 6 to 12 calories per kilo.
Right. So when we're looking at that from the men and women perspective, muscle mass,
Yes.
right? If we're looking
Yes.
at the public as what they are, and we generalize here, men
Mm.
are generally bigger, have more muscle
Yep.
mass.
Correct.
All right. Now let's
Yeah.
go one step further from that, and let's look at body composition. It's
Oh
probably
yeah.
more likely that the average general public, men are going to be 20 to 25% body fat, and women are going to be somewhere between 35 and 40 or 30 to 40. Maybe it's a larger range. Would that be accurate?
Oh yeah, yeah, for
Oh,
for for sure.
okay.
For
So
sure. Yeah.
then looking at that difference in body composition, would that also then be playing a difference with regards to their
Yeah.
initial, or not the initial,
Yeah.
but the
Because
weight
the
loss journey?
absolute mass size of amount of active tissue is low. That's it. So the active tissue encompasses the muscle tissue part. Yes. But it also encompasses all the organ mass, everything else. So again, bigger person, more tissue, smaller person, less tissue. That is the overarching factor I think that most people miss out on. And that's why you see like with some of the ladies that have like bigger structure, let's say more of the Nordic, Scandinavian ladies and stuff, they can actually kind of get away with eating what would be considered a lot more if you compare to, let's say, like an Asian guy that's more diminutive in structure, right? That's the natural structure, shorter, um, more, I would say, metabolically efficient in a sense. Yeah. So again, it really comes down to those factors more so than men versus women per se. But of course, there are other factors that I would love to talk about between the men and women physiological differences
Mm,
that impact the weight loss journey too. There's
all right.
also these things. Yeah. But right now we're just purely talking about like the biggest reason why women find it tough.
Yeah.
And that's the fact that you're just generally smaller in size and you just don't have as much lean tissue as a guy.
Okay. What about when it comes to things like metabolic rate? Does that also then boil down to what is your active size muscle
No, no.
tissue?
The
Or
metabolic rate is usually a function of all those two things I mentioned.
hmm. So would that also then play a difference here with regards to that? Or like is it relative to size? It's not gender related at all.
Yeah, it's more relative to size rather
Okay.
than actual gender specific.
All right. So then let's throw a bit of a spanner in the works here. And let's
Yes.
bring in this wonderful topic that I'm sure everybody loves to talk about, and that's hormonal difference.
Yeah. So that's the other factors that I was going to mention. This is the part that generally impacts the superficial weight loss part of things. Yes. So this is the tricky part because for women, there's a consistent flux of the hormones due to the natural cycle, right? Where at different parts of the cycle you have different fluctuations of specific hormones that will drive, that will drive different effects in the body, of which a large portion of those effects end up as maybe more water retention, which ultimately impacts weight. So what this means essentially is that for ladies, because the hormones kind of flux throughout that cycle of the month, and the period itself, it will impact the way the scale reads. So even if you are losing fat, there's a chance that it can easily be undone. Even if you're losing fat, the amount of fat loss on the scale will not register because it is overshadowed by, let's say, excessive water retention. So maybe for the week, you've lost about 0.3 grams of fat. Very, very good. But because you are in the time of your month leading into the period cycle where you're going to have your actual period, you retain a bit more water. You retain 1 kilo of water. So now your net is your zero point 0.7 kilos up on the scale when you step on the scale. And so that's why a lot of times when we coach like ladies, we are always um, consistently making sure to remind them, okay, at this part of the cycle, your weight might go up like this, or it might, stay stagnant like this, all this kind of stuff. And then what to expect, right? So we try to make sure we track those readings. We try to make sure we are averaging those out, and we also try to make sure we are comparing the same slice of the cycle with the same slice of the previous cycle. So you can't compare week 1 to week 2 of your period, or week 3 of your period with each other. You have to compare week 3 of March period to week 3 of February's period, for example, to see if you're actually making progress. And that's why, because of all these confusing factors, it makes it very difficult for ladies to be consistent enough with the weight loss journey, because you're talking about 4 weeks minimum, right? Like for most ladies, it's 4 weeks minimum where you actually have to log a whole bunch of data, and then you have to compare it with another 4 weeks. So you're talking like 8 weeks you have to, before you can truly figure out whether or not you're kind of losing weight, so to speak. And that's why there's a huge emphasis on like, okay, check your waist, measure, take your pictures, use all these other progress metrics to see whether or not you are actually still making progress in the right direction. And also to look at it from the perspective of addressing the conditioning that we all have. Like men and women both have this, but I think women even more in particular. The conditioning of step on the scale, weight goes up means something's wrong, right? Weight goes down means something's correct.
Mm.
So we need to undo that condition. We need to look at the weight for what it is. It's just a measure of our weight. Like literally, that's it. It doesn't mean anything else. It's just how much is gravity pulling on us, right? How much mass are we carrying? Now,
Mm.
what's the composition of that mass? That's the question we want to uh, remind ourselves to ask. But of course, that's the tricky part, and that's why like even though the science is relatively straightforward, the systems are complex, but the things we need to do are relatively simple. It's still very hard to do because our brains and our emotions and all these things can get in the way.
I find actually I'm quite pleased to hear my wife has changed her language a lot. She doesn't actually talk about losing weight nowadays. She talks about increasing muscle mass.
Oh, that is so good to hear, man. You have done a good job, my friend.
Right, but
How
with
long,
that,
how long did it take you? Sorry. How
it
long did
took
it take you?
it took a while. It took a while. This is what after 18 years of marriage. So yeah, it took a while.
Yeah.
Anyways, but coming back to this thing,
Yeah.
when we talk about hormones as well, if we jump back to the very basics of the difference between us, the levels of testosterone and estrogen, do they
Mm.
play any part in this, or do they primarily only make a difference if you're doing training rather than just the weight loss itself?
Um, yes, definitely that plays a part. But it plays a part more in the biological sense of how it drives muscle growth, muscle retention, all those factors that we talk about that contribute to the lean mass portion of things. The muscle mass, lean muscle mass portion of things, to be a bit more specific, right? Of course, testosterone gives guys the natural more masculine traits, and estrogen tends to balance that out with, it gives ladies more of their feminine traits with certain fat deposit biases, I would say. Um, but the beyond the muscle mass and muscle growth stuff, even within a female as well, I think one of the biggest things that people always say is like, oh, they don't have as much testosterone to grow muscle and stuff, which is really true. But at the same time, also, I there is this is a little bit more niche and a bit more in going to the semantics of it, but test doesn't work exactly the same way in women. Uh, yeah, and I would say like the estrogen factors in there as well are kind of what drives their muscle growth to some degree. But yeah, we don't want to get too much into it. But the main thing is just the hormonal effects that we talked about with regards to driving muscle mass is probably the biggest factor in that sense. Everything else with women, with the rest of the other hormones that kind of, go up and down, like your like LSH, your luteinizing hormone, so LH, not LSH, LH, your luteinizing hormone during the cycle, all this stuff will cause a bit more water retention and stuff. So that's the thing that really messes with a lot of ladies, all the bloating, all the water retention, all the puffiness, whatever. Like I said, right? And then it becomes a case of not just like we were just talking about stepping on the scale and feeling like the work is undone. It's also feeling maybe bloated, puffy, not feeling the best. And then these two things conflict together, and you can easily get misled to think, oh shit, something's going wrong. Now I'm doing all these things. I'm eating well, I'm eating clean, I'm getting my fiber, I'm getting my protein, but I feel bloated, I feel whatever. So it's very easy to immediately try to search for that answer and be like, no, 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 it must be the protein. Oh no, it must be this thing, it must be that thing. So I've seen that so happen so many times with a lot of the clients I coach even because they're all human, right? And for us, we all have our blind spots. Yeah. So man, I think I went on a tangent there. But anyway, back to your main point, which was do the hormones play a part? Yep, they do. They do drive the lean tissue component of the equation, which we've already established is relatively high, but the muscle mass part is just a subset of that lean mass. And then the other parts are more concerning factors with the water retentive components of things that cause all the weight fluctuations.
All right. So, uh, I think it would be remiss to just not point out as well that when we talk about muscle mass and increasing of muscle mass, specifically for these people now that we're talking here as people over 40, is muscle mass here is when we on a podcast here talk about muscle mass, we don't
Yeah.
only talk about it from the perspective of weight loss, right? We also don't speak about it from the perspective of like we want you to go be the next Mr. or Miss Olympia,
Oh, definitely
right?
not, man.
But what
Yeah.
we do talk about is increase the muscle mass to such a state that, you can carry that muscle across into your 60s, 70s, that you're still able to stand up, sit down, you're still able to run if you so please, and your quality of life, you can maintain a higher standard of quality of life if you have more muscle mass.
And just to quickly add on to that point, when you have more muscle mass, it's not so much that the muscle is burning more. Yes, it's active tissue, but the muscle enables you to burn more. So this is a very important distinction because a lot of times people think if I just have more muscle, oh great, I'm just going to burn a lot more. I can sit around all day and just like chill. But no, it just means that when you have more muscle, and I don't mean like from a bodybuilding perspective, as Mike has mentioned here, right? It's really more of the perspective of being strong and energetic and being able to do to carry yourself, to move around, to make simple daily tasks very, very, very easy. And then that kind of level of strength and flexibility and mobility and muscle mass that's aligned with that means that you are likely to be more active, you're likely to move around a lot more, and that is what increases your overall metabolic activity.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
To mention, sorry,
Yeah.
not to mention, when you have more muscle as well, you have more places to store your carbs too.
Mm, true.
Yeah,
I didn't even think about that one.
yeah. So you
There,
can eat
there,
a little bit
just to go,
more in
yeah,
that
just to go
sense.
on a side tangent here. Hopefully,
Sorry.
people will be patient. But you did say that just because you build more muscle mass doesn't mean you can now go and relax and just rely on the active muscle tissue. All of that.
Yeah,
But there is the case to be made though is that once you've reached a certain size that you say you're pleased with. Let's say you were working out 5 times a week and you've now
yeah.
reached the size that you want to be, you know, then you can actually taper down once you have that muscle tissue, right? Or does that not actually, the muscle mass, does that not play a part here? Is it more just that
Oh
you're
yeah,
the
yeah,
size that
yeah,
you want to
for
be?
sure, for sure.
Uh,
No, if you already reach the size, So I think what you might have misinterpreted might just be the when I say sit around and not do anything, I wasn't referring to workouts. I mean like just being basically active, get up,
Ah,
move
no, no.
around, kind of
This
thing.
is a complete side tangent though.
Yeah,
Just like for my own interest here, I'm just asking
yeah,
um, with regards to that kind of thing.
yeah.
When you, yeah, it's not even probably related to the weight loss, if I'm being honest. But it's a case of like, once you reach that certain size like that, and you're happy to maintain that size. When we're talking about
Yes.
workouts here, um, your workout that you require to actually maintain, you can go from say 5 days a week to 1 day a week, and you can maintain that same muscle mass, or will
Uh
your muscle regress?
oh, okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I okay, the basic principle is correct. Yes. You whatever it took to build up, you probably can you do maybe like 50% of that and maintain whatever you built. So maintenance always takes way less than the actual progress portion of things. Okay, so that's the general principle, but of course the exact amounts depends. So what I mean by depends, I'll give you some really cool examples. Okay, so let's say you have a person that trains like 5 times a week, nails their diet, grows and builds whole bunch of muscle over a year. So they made X amount of muscle gain. Then they decide, I'm just going to go down to only training 1 time a week for the next year. They might regress a bit. They won't be peak at that. So maybe they did X amount. Maybe now they might regress down and their baseline might be somewhere around 80 to 90% of X. That's it. For example, for sake of numbers. Um, but when you the so the rule here is the longer you've had it, the longer it stays around. Easy come, easy go, right? And the
Yeah,
opposite of that.
yeah.
So the best example I can give you for that is like some of my like my friends, they were trained by like Aussie lifting coaches, right, from China in Singapore. And there's one coach in China, there's one coach in Singapore from China. He used to train with the Ollie team when he was from a kid. So that's how they do in China, right? Like, they they put you into different segments in different camps, and it's very, very it's a crazy system, but it works, right, to produce their champions. And then they measure you and all that. So he was training since he was like, I don't know how old, 5 years old, 3 years old, whatever it is, right? And by the time he's reached 30 years old, that's considered almost middle age to retiring age for somebody that's trying to train for Olympics. He's already put in, yeah, pretty much 2.5 decades worth of training experience. So even though he comes down to Singapore, he starts coaching people, he barely trains. He maybe does like a training session, an odd random training session once in a while, right? Maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks or something. When he needs to, he can just pull out a 200 kilo squat anytime, 220 kilo squat anytime, because he has this whole background to it already. So again, the longer you've had it, the longer you can keep it, really. Which also, sorry to go on this tangent as well, but Mike started it, so blame him. But and that's why I'm so big into natural bodybuilding because when I started out, I definitely had thoughts about, oh, when is the time I'm going to take steroids? When is the time I'm going to like do that to up level?
Mm.
And then I realized that, wait a minute, I'm looking at all these natural bodybuilders that are emerging because they've been building themselves up for decades. Right now, they're emerging into their 50s, like their late 40s to like early 50s, and their physiques are phenomenal. They're improving and improving and improving. At the age where most people tell you, oh, past 40, you're not going to be able to build much muscle, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. But they are looking at their peak. At 50, like there's one guy, Jeff Alberts, 52, 53. He's like, he looks crazy, man. He just competed in Worlds when he turned 50 or something. So it really comes to show, or really goes to show that the longer you do it, he's got like what 30 years of training under his belt. So the longer you do it, the more the muscle's going to stay around. His training right now is ridiculously low by any normal gym rat standards. I think he does like 3 sessions a week, and he does like maybe 4 sets per body part to 6 sets per body part. Like that's about it.
No,
But of course
that
it's
was a
really high quality work. But at the same time, it's like that's his. current split. So it's so insane to think, you know?
Yeah, that was going to be a follow-up question of mine is that, does that same maintenance theory apply to people over 40? Like when you start looking
Yeah,
at issues like sarcopenia and all of that start playing their part.
yeah.
Is that will that drop still be to 90, 80% of your prime? Or would it be more if you only working out once a week? Would it be better to do maybe twice a week or so, if you're taking that
Yeah.
into consideration?
Well, like I mentioned at the start there, I mean, if using the example and you're just starting out, you're over 40, just starting out, I think the goal here is you want to do this long term. So you want to think about like it's about managing expectations, right? So if you're going into it and you say like I'm going to go 5 times a week and then for a year, for 2 years, then yeah, reasonably you could drop back from 5 times a week for 2 years to maybe 2 times a week. And you could probably keep like majority of whatever you've gained, you know.
Okay.
Um, but you have to play around with that little spectrum and that slider on this because for most people, will you even be able to last 5 times a week for 2 years? Probably not. Especially you're coming to it after 40 and look, there's so much shit that we have to deal with as we get older, right? Like I'm not even 40 yet, but I see it, right? I see all the stuff that life happens, all the obligations, responsibilities that we will have and we are having. Right, adulting is not easy, so so
Okay.
it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if you're gonna start, maybe just be sustainable about it. Just do 2 times a week first. Just do 3 times a week. Don't even think about like how much I need to drop back per se. Let life
Mm.
happen. If life happens where you can only get in 1 time a week, hey, that's what you can give, right? Give that 1 time a week because even that 1 time a week is going to prevent you from regressing. That's the goal. Never
Yeah.
regress. Just keep going forward. Especially with life after when you're really, really busy, not regressing or just maintaining your pace where you're at is a progression in and of itself.
All right. With that, let's jump back to the actual podcast that we came
Oh,
for
geez.
today.
Hopefully you all didn't tune out from there.
Yeah, hopefully, hopefully, hopefully. Okay.
Oh,
So
man.
we covered the hormonal aspect. There is
Yeah.
the one thing that I heard once before, and that is that, when you start losing in weight like that, one of the differences between men and women is that men generally start to lose or tend to lose visceral fat compared to women losing a lot of subcutaneous fat. Do you
Hmm.
find that that's also something that you've noticed as you've been coaching people, or is that like just really a meme?
Well, I think for women, there definitely is a higher bias towards depositing fat around the hips and around the waist. I mean, that's more of like biological pregnancy preparation thing, right? But but honestly, with most of my clients, that if we control everything, meaning they're training hard with weights, they are following their macros quite well, meaning they're hitting their protein and they're eating within the calorie range that they need to. The type of fellows we see is pretty standard. You always lose fat from outside in, so your limbs you tend to get like leaner first before it goes down. Eventually, to the last bits is around the belly. So both men and women will experience that. Yeah, so I don't really think there's any practical difference in that sense if you are doing all the correct stuff. That being said, I deal with a lot of over 40 women who are not necessarily training with weights. So for them, that impact or that difference can feel a lot higher, meaning their bellies will come back down, but they will still feel like there's still enough belly fat there because again, they don't have as much muscle. They're also not training like in very very intensely with weights. We're usually doing more body weight stuff. And don't get me wrong, all these stuff can still help you make progress, but you do need to really stress out the body with the training aspect, to a large degree to be able to elicit some kind of changes beyond a certain point.
All right.
Yeah.
What about if we start looking at things like psychological and emotional factors? Are
Yeah.
there common differences in how men and women approach weight loss from a psychological and emotional standpoint? Thinking things like stress eating, or, body image pressures.
Yeah. I actually want to say, yes, there is a difference, especially those 2 points you mentioned, meaning the binge eating and the social image pressure differences. But I actually feel like over these more recent years, it seems to be a lot more balanced. I do think when I started out doing PT about 16 years ago, it felt like there was a lot more pressure for, ladies to fit a certain mold, look a certain way. I mean, I'm from Singapore, right? And Singaporeans, it's in Asia, and a lot of times people follow that like K-pop or Japanese aesthetic, that kind of Asian aesthetic. There was some be slim, petite. And I do feel like I saw a lot of that when I was training all the ladies in that era. But now it seems to be shifting a bit more, and like I think more ladies are embracing weights and being okay with like looking fit, not slim and demure, fragile, petite kind of thing, but more like fit. Actually, I actually have ladies now telling me I want to be able to kind of see my six pack. Maybe I don't need it like super etched in, but I want to be able to like see, oh wow, cool, I actually have kind of a six pack, like nice flat tummy, but with muscles, right? I actually have ladies saying that, which is so cool. And then you talk about the guy side of things. You would think that, for most guys, hey, binge eating or stress eating or social pressure might not be an issue, but it seems like there's been this whole physique inflation since the 2000s until now, where, in the early 2000s, the kind of, I guess, the kind of mainstream media physiques were probably not as muscular as what they are like now when you see like, Chris Hemsworth and stuff. But actually, now that I'm saying this, I'm thinking about it. Wait a minute. When we go back to like the 80s, the
The
80s
Arnold, we
and the
had
90s, you have
Sylvester,
Arnold, you have Sylvester Stallone, you have
Jean-Claude
Jean-Claude Van
Van
Damme.
Damme.
I mean, even Steven Seagal at some point, right before he became like sit down Bushido master or whatever. Um, yeah. Okay. Wait. So let me take that back. I think the influence of male body image is just a lot more. It seems a lot more pressurizing nowadays because I get a lot of guys asking me, should I jump on stuff or should I take steroids and blah blah blah? Because like in the gym, a lot of the kids that are pretty young, they're not even 20, right? I've seen some of them where I know they're taking like SARMs, which are like essentially mock steroids, and some of them are even taking steroids already just to try to get the results. But I do think that's more of the social media generation thing, where you have a lot of these, top 1% kind of physiques on social media and they are influenced by that. So I do think both sexes do have their issues with body image just in different ways. And I think it's a lot more prevalent right now because of, marketing, portrayal of media, social media generation stuff. So that's that part. With regards to stress eating, I see it a lot more with ladies than men, but I'm not sure of the statistics to be honest. And also because do take into account, I've been working a lot with ladies over these past 5 years. I work with men and women, yes, but predominantly women over the past 5 years, in terms of general lifestyle. So a lot of these ladies do have stress eating issues that we do deal with. We try to fix food relationships and stuff. A lot of this also stem from when they were younger, and just growing up, and I'm sure many of the listeners here can also relate with parents telling them, especially the ladies, right? You probably have like parents that unknowingly were very toxic, said telling you, "Oh, why are you so skinny? Eat more." And then when you eat a bit more, you put on some weight, they tell you,
Why
"Hey,
are you getting
how,
fat?
how come you're so fat?" Right? "Oh, wow, you put on some weight," the kind of thing, right? Unsolicited comments from relatives, things like that. I'm pretty sure many listeners will have those stories to share as well.
I think it's more
Um,
an Asian thing though.
is it? Is it? You think?
I find from my experience, I find
Yes. Okay.
like with, where you have that, oh, you must eat
Yes.
more, you must eat more, you must eat more, and then you like
Oh yeah.
just
And then after
over, and
that,
then it's, oh, why are you so fat? Why are you so fat?
yes.
Like, I didn't really get that when I
Yeah.
was living in the West, but
Fair
here I
enough.
see it
Fair.
a lot.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
Right.
So there's that. Yeah. But I do have some guys where they have come to me and they do have like not eating disorders, but they do use food to cope as well.
Mm.
But I will also say that, to be honest, for most of the guys that I've interacted with, and again, this could just be survivorship bias because I attract maybe more guys that are similar to myself, who might not necessarily even have like these kind of issues, predominantly. But yeah, most of the guys that even when they come to me and they say I have this stress eating stuff or this other kind of stuff, after a while working together, we're able to kind of get them off it relatively easily. And I think that's also just because it's not even that big of an issue in the first place. Just something that they noticed they were doing. And when you put some environmental changes in, you clean up their diet, you make them eat better. You just feel better enough that you just stop having these kind of cravings.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think it's also because, as your lifestyle improves, your maybe your mental aspect also gets stronger or it transforms
Mhm.
in a way. So the reliance on that food is not necessarily that it's gone away, but that the need
Yes.
for it has actually gone away.
Yes, exactly. It's the reliance on the food to satisfy something. It's not
Mm.
actually the reliance on the food itself because you could easily replace that reliance. It's a coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
You could easily replace that with any other vice, so to speak. And people do, right? People take drugs. People, depend on over-the-counter
Mm.
drugs. Maybe people take illegal drugs. Maybe people use alcohol. I think alcohol is one of the biggest ones because, in my opinion, and not to go on to a big diatribe about alcohol, but in my opinion, alcohol is like one of the most socially accepted things that should be illegal, in my opinion.
Well, it was at
Because
some point.
no, no, because I mean, it's literally poison to your body, right? Like
Yeah.
that's why your body tries to metabolize it so quickly. You get it out of the system. It needs to break it down before it does damage, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is if you tell people you don't drink, you're looked at as like you're some sort of weirdo.
Yeah. Well, you just too goody two shoes,
Right?
is
Yeah, it's
it?
like, are you too good for it? It's like, okay, cool. But maybe I just don't like it. Maybe I don't like how it makes me feel, you know? Yeah, so it's just weird, man. I think alcohol is one of those things. And people can mask behind it. Like if somebody goes out and has like an all-nighter, binge drinks alcohol next day, oh, super big hangover, it's normal. Like nobody really bats an eyelid. But the
Yeah.
moment you say, hey, I don't want to drink, I'm okay with my Coke Zero, right? People are like, what the hell?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you kind of thing?
Don't
It
invite
just
him
feels
anymore.
upside down.
He's a party pooper.
Yeah, it feels super upside down, to be
But
honest.
talking about the food related things, what about dietary preferences and habits? Do you see any difference in
Yes.
patterns
This
in
actually,
dietary choices or eating habits between men and women that might also
yeah,
influence their weight loss success?
yes, definitely at 100%. For most men, I don't know, is it biological or what? I haven't looked into this, but this is my observation. Most men actually love proteins. Like, ask any guy, right? We will enjoy a good steak. We'll enjoy even just eating like a good chicken thigh, fried nice like fried chicken. Not even like fully fried chicken. Just give me like the grilled chicken, man. This sounds good, right? Like to us. For ladies, they seem to not have any kind of protein palate. Like a very small percentage of them only come to me saying, "Hey, you know what? I love my proteins."
I
Like
will
I'm
tell
very
you,
small percentage, like 10%.
my 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 daughter is the exception.
Yeah.
She can eat a
So
whole chicken by herself.
okay, that's good. That's good. But generally, the overwhelming preference in terms of a taste palette for a lot of ladies seems to be just like a lot of them will say they love carbs, right? But the reality is they love all the carby, fatty foods. Like to eat pasta, like to eat pastries, all these things are just carbs and fats, carbs and fats. Okay, I'm not so sure why there is that palette difference. But yeah, there just is. Maybe it's related or correlated with the differences in natural mass distribution, like the muscle mass, body composition we talked about. Maybe that's that. I'm not too sure. I haven't looked into any of that research or you know as of now. But observationally, practically, there is this difference. So it's a lot harder for ladies to get in more protein because it just feels like a chore. Whether like and I think the exception is for ladies like they are okay with eggs. Most of them like to eat eggs, but the unfortunate reality of eggs is that eggs are very very good protein, have very good protein in them, but they also have a high amount of fats. So it kind of negates the calorie amounts, right? Because you're only getting about what 40% of the total calories from the egg. Only 40% of that is protein.
And if you want to
Uh,
know more about that, we do have a podcast on the eggs specifically. If
Oh
you want to
yeah,
learn
yeah, we
more
talked
about
about that
eggs.
before.
But do you
But
find
yes,
also that the dietary preferences like this between men and women, are they also different than cultural wise? Like, do you find like Asian women are more inclined to go for carbs, but necessarily not Western women, or do you find it's across the board?
I think both profiles. generally still go for carbs and stuff. But I do notice that the more Western or Western influenced ladies uh, have some already have some kind of like pre-understanding, that they need to have protein at a meal. To some degree, they will like try to at least get a little bit of protein, so they are okay with having a bit more meat and stuff with their meals. This generally what I've noticed is they still face both of them still face the same issues though. Like they don't particularly like it. It's a little bit more forgiving on the Western side of things. But I also think that's because cuisine wise, when you talk about Western culture,
Mm,
protein has always been like a predominant part of the meal. Versus Asian meals, protein is not really it's a supplement, right?
mm.
It's like, oh, main thing is always just carb heavy and
The
stuff,
carbs
and then a little bit of protein to go along with it.
and a
Now,
sprinkle of veggie.
and a sprinkle of it. Well, I think it depends on which part of Asia, maybe.
Yeah.
But
This is
yeah.
purely coming from the hawker stalls. Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. That's a different story.
Okay. The next one we'll jump onto then is what about like the difference in approaching exercise? Are there certain types of exercise that might be particularly effective or preferred by men and women?
I think preference and effectiveness are two different things, right? So we talk about effectiveness first. There's no difference, man. Like everybody should just be lifting weights. Everybody should be doing some sort of cardio. Okay, baseline. In terms of preference, though, women I think still predominantly like to do cardio-based stuff or things that make them sweat a lot, makes them feel like they are burning calories, kind of thing. Um, I think generally that's still a very prevalent uh conception, right, and perspective on it. But increasingly, a lot of women are embracing weights and they're lifting heavier. They are learning how to like push themselves on there, and I think that's the shift that we are seeing. So yeah, so in terms of preferences, women generally don't like to lift heavy weights, and they prefer to do more of the cardio-based stuff because it makes them feel like they are really pushing and they're doing something to the body. At least that's what it seems. There's some guys that also think like that, don't get me wrong. But again, most of the guys that I train already have some sort of beginner intro to lifting weights. They already have some sort of minor interest in it already, and we facilitate that further. But yeah, for most ladies, they still like the cardio stuff, the classes. They need a lot more variety. I think for a lot of ladies, a lot more variety is needed um, in terms of the preference as well. So all these are less just general challenges. And I think if you are listening to this and all these things I'm mentioning, and you're a lady and you're female, and hopefully you are agreeing with me, but also not getting offended by some of the things that I'm saying. These are just general preferences. You might feel like, hey, you know what? Actually, what Twain is saying on some of these things are pretty much true. Like, this is what I like. And there's nothing wrong with preferences, but it's also important to understand that the things that you do have certain effects, have certain benefits as well. Ultimately, exercise is one of those things where we always talk about if you're doing something, it's always better than nothing, right? So that's important. I think ultimately at the baseline, first principles, it's like that's key. We need that part. You have to be able to enjoy it. You have to be able to continuously do it for it to be sustainable. But beyond that, once we move past that, and you're really talking about, I want to achieve a certain result, you have to start adjusting things a little bit more towards that goal. For most people who want to lose weight, honestly, you just need maybe just 1, 2 training sessions and with weights, and then maybe you can have the rest of it as cardio sessions, do spin classes, whatever else you want to complement it with, and you probably
Inter-
will be okay. Yeah.
it's interesting the words that you use because I see you repeatedly use the word that women say they feel. And
Mm,
from my experience that I've actually dealt with them, it's very similar. So there's a difference between the two, the guys and the girls that I've worked out with before,
yeah,
is that the girl will say is that, oh, I feel like that was a good workout.
yeah,
You know, I feel like I'm losing weight. I feel like this is not working. I feel all these kind of things. Compared to the guy will say, I see that was a good workout. I see I'm not losing weight. I see, and how does he see? Because he's very metrically driven. So he'll have an app or he'll
yeah,
have something that he's actually capturing all the data from the workouts themselves, or from his journey, and then he'll take that, and then that's where he based it from. So it's the difference in words and the difference in approach with regards to how they report
yeah.
on the
I,
things. And
I
I've
do
always
think
found
that
that
it
very
is.
interesting because I've seen it on a number of occasions with a number of different people, but yet the
Yeah,
same language gets used. And
yeah.
I always found it quite interesting. But I just want to
Well,
ask one other question here is that with regards to this exercise approach,
mhm,
let's say two people, male and female, choose running as their cardio. Is there any difference in the way that they approach running that you've found? Or is it really just like more personality or temperament based? Like a type A person will be more gung ho and will really push it, whilst the other one will necessarily like, oh, gentle jog, oh, that felt nice, that kind of thing. Or
yeah.
is there any kind of difference also that you could experience here between the two genders?
I really think it's more of a personality thing. Um, because even for the guys, I do see a lot of like I do have some guys that just want to lose weight only. So they
Hmm.
kind of have having the same perspective as generally what I've described most of the ladies to have, right?
Yeah.
Um, and they'll do stuff like they'll go for spin, they'll do all that because for them weights is boring also. So they do all these kind of classes and stuff and say like, oh, I feel like I've been burning all this. So I really think it's a personality kind of thing. Because and personalities tend to enhance the the baseline attributes of the person as well, right? So somebody that's a more type A personality, they might be like ultra focused and try to push for things. Um, they if you give them cardio, they might think, oh, if he gives me 3 sessions of cardio in a week, maybe I can do five, the kind of thing. Um, yeah, so you have that kind of personality for sure. And then you also have the other kind of personality where some people are just like, oh, he told me to do 3 sessions, but I managed to do two. I think that's good enough. Yeah. I don't think it's exclusively between men and women. And again, because my sample size is still pretty small. I mean, although I've been training for 16 years and I speak like that about the differences that I observe, take note, my sample size is still very, very small. I've only helped about like 500 plus people. I'm talking on a one-to-one basis, right? So I'm not like those people that inflate the numbers and be like, oh, I talked to 10,000 people or something like that. But yeah, I've only helped like one-to-one about 500, 600 people over these past 16 years. Uh, and then that's a small sample size, to be honest. And it's also a biased sample size because again, most of the men that I worked with tend to be more towards the serious lifter category. So they already take the lifting part of things relatively seriously, or they have a very specific kind of like physique goal they're looking to get. Then they're willing to do what they need to do to get there. So that's already a biased sample, right? So
I
I think
wouldn't
it's
say
more
it's
personality
biased and
based.
small. I would say it's more realistic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is realistic because it's
Right.
still relatively normalized, right? I mean, five,
Yeah.
600 people is still a big enough sample size, but
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of like drawing fast conclusions, it's obviously too small. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So earlier we touched on the differences in hormones, right?
Yes.
Now we want to jump on. We want to revisit that slightly, but from a different perspective. Because keep in mind is that the majority of the people that are listening to this particular podcast or who it's targeted towards are
Yeah.
people over the age of 40. And for many of people over the age of 40 is a very significant time or significant event starts happening
Mm.
in your 40s. Some maybe 50s, but generally in the 40s. How does that now start playing a part with regards to men and women when you're talking about going through on a weight loss journey? So we're talking about things like menopause, these
Yeah.
kinds of different physiological things that are going to happen due to the hormones that are actually driving. I'm sure men
Yeah.
have their own things. Midlife crisis comes in, but I'm not
But
sure if
but
that
but
really
but
falls
midlife
into
crisis
here
is
as a
yeah,
physiological
but
one. But all these things start coming into play. So how do these changes affect weight loss?
well, I think we need to
I think the big
clarify
one to
because
focus on really is
yeah.
like there's going to be a difference between men and women at this juncture of our lives with regards to what women
At
go
40,
through
right?
compared
At
to what
40
men
plus.
go
Yeah.
through. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say for men, physiologically, the only issue might be if you have not been taking care of yourself rapidly, you might start to face maybe declining testosterone production. Just because, like, if you accumulate a lot of belly fat, you just get really fat and have a lot of excess fat to lose, you live a very unhealthy lifestyle. All these things will impact your body's ability to like produce all these other hormones that are considered a bonus, if you will. They're lower on the totem pole for what's considered important for survival, right? So like your sex hormone production is, I don't know, eighth, ninth down that totem pole of survival. So yeah, uh, you might experience that physiologically, but aside from that minor physiological difference, which is a result of lifestyle and not a actual biological, natural occurring thing per se, it's your lifestyle that you accumulate a lot of fat, so it's kind of like your fault in a sense, right? You drove it to that state. Men actually have a much easier time if you have been keeping yourself relatively fit, relatively lean and stuff. It's actually quite easy to continue with the fat loss journey, and or just pick it up at that point. Okay, for women now you have the issue of menopause. And obviously, menopause just takes whatever you experience in your one period cycle and stretches that shit out to a couple years, maybe, months to years. Um, and it's so variable because woman to woman, it's so individual how they go through the experience. Even for most ladies, when you talk to them, and I talk to all these clients that I have, every one of them seems to go through their cycle and experience it very differently. Some ladies, for them, their period doesn't come with that many symptoms, lucky them. And for some of them, their periods always come with like debilitating cramps, can't do anything, all this kind of stuff. Well, a lot of it can be said that there's all these other factors to consider: their lifestyle, how healthy they are, whether they work out, all this kind of stuff, but there's just so many variables that it becomes so individualized in that sense. And you have to really take it on a case by case basis. But when you talk about menopause, it makes it so difficult for ladies just because right now your body's just transitioning from regularly producing eggs to no longer producing any more eggs. Right? You've finished your stockpile of eggs, it's done, you're going to stop already. So that's a tough period for your body to transition through. And there's going to be certain symptoms, certain things that you will experience as a result of that process that you have to kind of like embrace. Those are like the growing pains component of things. But where you can actually prevent or smoothen the journey and reduce, mitigate some of these side effects will be if prior to going through this journey, you're already taking good care of your health. If you've prepared your body to be in a state where it can receive this transition better, that's the thing. So a lot of times, especially for my younger clients, that they are like early 40s, even late 30s kind, most of them would not have gotten any perimenopausal symptoms. So I always tell them, hey, right now I'm so glad that you're here because we're going to get you in tip-top shape so that when you eventually hit that perimenopausal phase, you sustain this, you keep all these up, you will experience some side effects, but it's not going to hit you as hard as somebody that did not take care of themselves. And suddenly they're layered on with this extra challenge, extra layer of challenge. Yeah.
Mm.
So that's really the big thing. So for ladies, in that sense, it still kind of comes down to the same thing, right? You still have to take care of yourself. But if you don't, you have this extra hurdle to jump. So the question is like, how big of a hurdle do you want that hurdle to be? How big of a speed bump is it going to be on your journey?
But with regards to if we're specifically talking about weight loss, right? The weight loss
Yeah,
journey.
yeah.
Like you were mentioning earlier when you were talking about the hormonal process, and then you were saying like usually they will hold more water at the time of that particular cycle of the month.
Oh, yeah,
Um, and so that weight's going to go up and then it's going to come down after and all that. But then you're also saying now that the menopause is like that cycle of the month, but stretched over a couple of months, couple of years, however long it takes for them to go through.
yeah.
So how is that going to affect then with regards to somebody who's either started a weight journey or is looking to go on to a less loss journey?
In terms of sorry, in terms of what again?
So in terms of
The
like
weight loss itself, or
sorry,
like the amount of the net weight loss, or the weight loss on the scale, or what?
I think the whole journey really, like when you're looking at it, like it's I think this is the thing is a bit difficult for for a guy to really comprehend and wrap around
Yeah.
because it's something that affects so much of the woman. Like we belittle it down to this little it's just your time of the month thing. It's like you know what's that word? Let the river flow or whatever it is. The song that we had back in the day. Um, that's like that's as far as it goes for us, right?
Yep.
But as far the amount that it actually affects them and plays a part for their mental well-being, their physical well-being, all these things come into play, and it's affected by this one event. And
Yep.
so now when they're actually going through the menopausal time, which is now an extended period of that, and then you want to add on that you want to go on to a weight loss journey.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure that there's going to be more issues that they will obviously need to look at compared to somebody who's 10 years younger that's going on to this weight loss journey. So
Yes.
things
Yeah.
that they need to be aware of. So maybe the scale, as we said earlier, maybe the scale for them would not be a good place for them to measure their weight loss. Maybe for them, look at the how their clothes fit, or do measurements or photos or these kinds of things. See like how is their fitness journey? Have they improved? Can they go up a flight of stairs now without
Yeah.
breathing hard? Maybe those metrics would be something better to focus on rather than looking at the scale, because the scale might bring a bout of depression. Because not only is you have your water weight, but you maybe also have all the fluctuating hormones, if we can put it that way, that this thing that they're going through that we admittedly don't understand.
Yeah. I think the if I were to summarize that, you're not wrong in that sense, but I would say whatever you've just mentioned also applies to any lady, really. In that sense. And technically, once they are past the menopausal stage, actually, because now their hormonal levels are very stable, actually, it's technically easier for them to lose weight.
Okay, so that would be once they passed, right?
That's once they pass. But now let's
Mhm.
talk about the actual onset of menopause. So the only thing that changes, they're still going to get all the challenges of whatever it was originally. Now, like that means includes the daily weight fluctuations and all this kind of stuff. But now they're going to have additional stress coming in where they're going to be more tired, they're going to be more fatigued because maybe sleep's going to be more disrupted than usual, things like this. And these things will just make you feel worse, right? So it's going to exacerbate all these emotions that you already had with relation to scale weight and progress that you feel you're not making and all this kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
Um, which is why, again, the earlier you can start on this process or wherever you're starting at, like Mike said, progress metrics are not should not just be limited to the scale. Look at your clothes, how they fit. Look at your pictures. Maybe take pictures of yourself, see how you are, changing in the visuals. Um, talk about your daily energy. How's your energy levels like? Are you able to climb up a flight of stairs without being breathless? Is your fitness improving? Is your strength improving? Could you only do one body weight squat previously, and then now you can do 20? Things like this. Uh, we definitely have to use a lot more of a very report card, if you will, to really make a good sense of whether or not you're making progress.
Okay, because I know if you're going to go through all this kind of, how should we say, event in your life, I
Yeah,
think motivation for weight loss might be dampened if you don't see the results actually, or the improvements and progress
yeah,
visually, or however. So I always feels like rather one of the things that I would try and push towards is that don't look at the weight on the scale anymore while you're going through that, but vary the metrics. Right.
yeah.
But I think we've covered most of the things. So if in closing, if you had to take everything we've discussed so far, what are maybe some strategies that you would tailor for men over 40 and women over 40, that they can optimize their individual weight loss journeys?
I would say for women especially, planning ahead really matters when it comes to your nutrition. Like it or not, your your calorie budget is likely going to be much lower than the guys. Okay, and I can tell you the broad range of calories that most women need to have to consume in order to kind of drop weight. Is anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 calories. Okay, and that's if you're prepping everything, meaning you have really total control and you are very accurate with your measurements. If not, then you probably even have to buffer a little bit less because again, the number one reason people think they're eating very little calories is because they are actually not tracking anything and they are underestimating how much they're eating. This has been proven time and time and time again. Yeah, most people underestimate by on average about 50% of the calories. So if you think you're eating 2,000 calories, you're probably eating 3,000. Okay, and because most people don't count in the little bites where your partner says, "Hey, you want to have a bite of this?" Or like your kids didn't finish up the food and you said, "Oh, I'll just have this like last quarter of a donut or whatever," right? That they didn't finish. And then all the little drinks that you might have, the extra tea. This one is just a tea with, some little bit of milk. And I just put only like half a teaspoon of sugar. Yeah, probably not much. All these little things, these things will add up, right? Oh, I was hungry. I had a handful of nuts. Ah, right. The difference between like a small handful of nuts and a big handful of nuts can be as much as 250 or 300 calories in and of itself. So, yeah. So for women, I would say definitely the planning and doing some sort of like easy meal preps for yourself, or at least knowing like very convenient, reasonable meal prep options is going to be very important. The the quality of the food that you eat becomes a lot more important because the amount of calories you're taking or you have to take to lose weight and to maintain even at a lower body weight is not going to be as much. So healthy eating really is a big deal for ladies. I'm not saying that it's not a big deal for guys. Okay, let me be clear with that. But I'm just saying that for guys, because I deal with a lot of guys that are like 90 kilos, 100 kilos, 80 kilos, right? And they're already lifting some weights. They're active generally, they're moving around, they already have a predominantly high amount of metabolically active tissue. They themselves already have a bigger calorie budget. I have guys that can lose weight on 2,200 calories, right? I have some guys that actively bodybuilding, they're already losing weight on 2005, 2006, you know? So guys just have that advantage in a sense. That being said, if you do not try to do it properly, or you do not try to at least have a system into the process, what you're going to find is that very quickly, once your calories or your metabolism adapts to your current calorie amount, and you need to drop your calories further, you start to run into issues. You start to find it super challenging or a lot more restricting because you did not systemize the way you plan out your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, and all. So in that sense, women have the advantage because they are forced to do that already and make that their lifestyle. Um, but yeah, I would say ladies have to probably do a lot more planning. The other part and recommendations I would also suggest is that for ladies especially, you probably want to invest in a protein powder that you enjoy for two reasons. Because number one is the easiest way for you to get as much protein and hit your protein targets without taking up a whole bunch of your calorie budget. Okay, so you need something easy and convenient. And so what that does is it allows you a lot more room for all these other things that you actually enjoy. More of your carbs and other fat sources, right? So that's what I would definitely recommend. Because most of the time you're not really going to want to eat a ton of meat anyway. Yeah. Uh, what else? What else? Yeah, and the other part about it in terms of tracking progress, I would say is it's a big one. And as we've talked about, as Mike mentioned just now, use various degrees of various types of progress metrics to track your progress. So not just weight, but make sure you're taking your waist measurements, make sure you're observing your day-to-day energy levels. Are they improving? Are they not improving? Things like this. Yeah, so weight plus waist are the two biggest ones. Make sure you measure your waist because I've had ladies where, right now I have one lady. She's a bit on the bigger frame side, so she's not like fat. She's actually very athletic, relatively muscular for a lady, and she's on the bigger frame side. So her weight has been fluctuating around 80 kilos and went down to 77, and then now it's back up to 79, and it's like going around that range. But her waist has been dropping. She started off around 83 cm. Now she's already down to 74.5 cm.
Oof.
And the weight is still around the like if you look at it, the net displacement, she started around 80.5 kilos. She's now 79.5 kilos. So if I use weight only as the measure, that's literally only a kilo off, right?
Mm.
And you will feel like a failure. So you must use um you must use other metrics as well. For men, I would say most of you guys that are listening are probably just have a lot of excess fat to lose, man. So your weight should be going down. Okay? Like fact of the matter is your weight probably should be going down. Now, if you're already quite lean and you're like kind of like skinny fat, yeah, maybe you might not want to just look at weight. You might want to look at your visuals. Are these muscles improving as you train? Is your waist kind of like tightening up a bit more as you train? Things like that would definitely be very useful as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think
Does
for
that
me,
sound
the main one that I
comprehensive?
always say for men over 40 is waist. I would always say is measure the waist.
Yeah, 100%. I mean both. Like both
Mm.
should be measuring the weight because ultimately, even though you're losing weight, what you want to do is make sure that you're actually losing fat and you are shaping up appropriately, getting rid of the excess that is not useful, healthy for you.
Awesome. I think we've covered everything. So if we had to end it, I would say is that while the scale might sometimes seem to tip in the favor of one gender over the other in the initial stages of weight loss, understanding the underlying physiological and hormonal differences between men and women over 40 is key to a more informed and ultimately successful journey for everyone. Remember, your body is unique, and tailoring your approach to your individual needs and circumstances is paramount. If you have found this discussion insightful and want to share this knowledge with others who might be navigating their own weight loss experiences, please do share this episode. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on 40 Plus Fit if you're listening, whichever platform that you're listening on Spotify, we're on YouTube. Yeah. So you never miss out on any valuable tips and information, which we love to design and help you achieve your health and fitness goals in your 40s and beyond. And then,
Cool.
other than that, we'll see you in the next episode. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep prioritizing your well being.
Awesome. See you guys.
Ciao.